Hello and welcome to Small Screen Maniac. I am your host, Chad Miller, and in this episode, I'm going to tackle the premiere debut episode of the X-Men animated series from 1992. It's truly hard to believe it's been 30 years since the show debuted, and that I was just beginning my fandom for X-Men at this point in my life. And so coming back to the show and taking it from a perspective of starting fresh and new is just mind-blowing to a degree. So here we go. The show opens with a news footage montage of an attack by mutants, actually it's Sabretooth, and Jubilee's foster parents are watching it, and they are questioning whether or not they should have taken her in, considering that she herself is a mutant, and it addresses the mutant problem. There's rampant prejudice against mutants, being that because they have powers that they don't seem to control or understand themselves, that they are a threat to humanity. And that is the growing theme of what the X-Men are all about, and mutants in general. So that sets the stage for the entire series itself. So at this point, there's this giant robot that basically busts into the household of Jubilee's foster parents in search of Jubilee in order to capture her, and Jubilee isn't there. So it's quite a dangerous situation, and we don't know the motives of the robot or anything like that. So it's quite frightening, to say the least. So our main character is Jubilation Lee, also known as Jubilee, and she's actually at the mall, and she's at the video arcade and playing a video game, and her powers kind of like go berserk and destroys the game, and the video arcade manager kind of gets on her case about it, and she flees and bumps into a Rogan Storm from the X-Men, and she kind of runs in the other direction, and it turns out this giant robot has tracked Jubilee to the mall and enters the mall in search of Jubilee. And so this big, like, huge scene comes into play, and Gambit is there, and he's flirting with one of the store clerks, and Storm and Rogue see what's going on, and Storm busts out into her costume by using her powers, which I don't know how that's possible, but it was kind of a cool moment, but it just doesn't work with her power set. So yeah, not sure about that. So the Sentinel, which we don't really call it a Sentinel at that point, tries to capture Jubilee, but it doesn't work out, because by the time that Jubilee exits the mall, Sentinel follows her. Cyclops is out there, and he uses his optic beams to blast off the Sentinel's head. Boom. So previous to Cyclops blasting off the Sentinel's head, the Sentinel had actually gassed Jubilee, so she had actually passed out, so she had no idea what was going on. So the X-Men had taken her back to their headquarters, which is the X-Mansion, Charles Xavier School for the Gifted Youngsters, and so she wakes up and she has no idea where she is, and she's locked in this room, which is kind of like a hospital room, so she has no idea what's going on. And she blasts herself out using her powers, which she's slowly starting to figure out how to use. And she's roaming about, and she kind of peers into a room, and she sees Beast doing his science stuff, and then that kind of freaks her out a little bit, and then she goes into another area and peers into another room where we see Morph, who is mimicking what he is watching on the television, including seeing footage of Jubilee being attacked at the mall, and so that freaks her out. And then she goes into another area where she sees Charles Xavier and Jean Grey talking about the problem of mutants, and they also have the head of the Sentinel in the room that they're in at the time. So Jubilee's freaked out, and she's trying to get out, and Xavier and Jean realize that, Jubilee's gotten loose. Jubilee freaks out, tries to get away, she zaps this doorway, she goes in and runs across Wolverine in the middle of a training exercise in the Danger Room with Gambit, and it's this wonderful little scene of how the Danger Room operates, and yeah, that was really cool. At this point, Storm takes Jubilee and gives a lot of exposition to her about who mutants are and who the X-Men are and what the school is all about. So, a lot of explanation about how mutants don't know that they're mutants until about their teenage years, that they're gifted with powers that are genetically evolved, and that humanity doesn't accept them for who they are, and that Professor Xavier has started this school for them to train and use their powers for the benefit of mankind, even though mankind fears and hates them. So Professor X has a meeting with the X-Men about a hidden agenda that the Mutant Control Agency has with gathering mutants for a testing sort of program that is sort of like a hidden agenda, and that's what Sentinels are used for, is capturing mutants for this program. And at that time, Jubilee is going home to be back with their foster parents, and there's this mysterious man that's actually questioning her foster parents about her relations with his so-called X-Men. And on the way home, she gets captured by the Sentinels, and that's not good news. Professor X sets out the X-Men to check out this secret government agency to figure out what's going on and how it's going to affect the mutant populace from here on out. And as they go along, we get a lot of dynamic between Wolverine and Cyclops, which is integral because there's great tension between them, and that's fantastic. And then as they arrive on scene, we get a little backstory about the history of how some of the characters and how they developed their mutant powers and what it meant to them in their lives, which really sets things up for the show and each of the characters that discuss their powers. And I feel that's really fitting and a great way to introduce this show, because it takes that delicate turn of not only puberty, but to learn that you have a power that sets you apart from the rest of humanity as well, And that was a really good touch. And then there's this big ambush scene, and that is where the first episode leaves us. So that is the actual first episode of the animated series of X-Men from 1992, 30 freaking years ago. Oh, it's still so hard to wrap my mind around that. So stay tuned for future episodes of Small Screen Maniac, where I'm going to be tackling other shows other than just X-Men. So hit like, subscribe, leave some comments as far as like other shows you would like me to unravel and discover. Keep an eye on my channel for future polls. I had a poll on here previous to this episode about shows that I would like to do. I just got my first votes for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so I will be tackling that somewhere in the near future. So yeah, and if you like what you see here and you would like to support the channel, you can just buy me a cup of coffee by the link in the description. And as always, love and light to you all.